Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Unmade Godzilla movies, where I talk about installments that either did not make the cut or evolved into other films in our favorite film franchise featuring our favorite radioactive dinosaur overlord. You know, these Unmade Godzilla movies remind me of the time I recorded the original raw video file for this project. You see, this was earlier last month, and the reason why that one didn't come out was because I accidentally deleted the file when I was halfway done with editing.
Hello, darkness.
You're so stupid!
Anyway, last time I talked about an unmade animated film, a scrapped localization of Godzilla Raids Again, a pitch for a Shin Godzilla sequel, and earlier drafts of GMK in 2014. And for this time around, I had you guys vote on which ones you wanted me to talk about. So let's go ahead and take a look at what y'all wanted. And to reiterate what I said last time, with each video there's going to be a link in the description with a poll where you get to vote on which projects you'd like to see me cover next. The poll is going to be up for 7 days after the video is posted, and afterwards I'll pick the top 3 to 5 for the next one, depending on the amount of coverage. Let's go ahead and get the ball rolling with... of course we gotta start with a weird one. Though I suppose there's no real way to avoid it, because this is perhaps the very first unmade Godzilla movie, period. Initially proposed as a sequel to Godzilla Raids Again, written by H-Man writer Hideo Unagami, Bride of Godzilla would have followed Dr. Shida, a scientist who built a robot in the image of his wife, and then another one in the image of his daughter. We also find out that in addition to Dr. Yamane's theory of Godzilla and Anguirus living in undersea trenches, they actually live in the Hollow Earth. However, a giant chameleon and a prehistoric bird who is believed to be a concept of Rodan, but I couldn't find much info about it, start attacking Kyushu alongside Godzilla and Anguirus, and Dr. Shida sends his robot daughter after them. After defeating the two new monsters in Anguirus, the robot faces Godzilla, and the two fall in love with one another. So then the two retreat to the Hollow Earth, only for the robot to actually be a walking hydrogen bomb that eventually goes off, destroying Godzilla's home and presumably the monster too. So yeah, that was a thing. And it didn't happen. And I'm kinda glad it didn't, because we wouldn't have gotten King Kong vs. Godzilla, which, as we know, changed the entire franchise for the better, I'd say. This is an interesting one because it's not an official Godzilla project, but an unauthorized one from Hong Kong. In 1980, writer Chris Lee and director Fuxian Shu wanted to take a crack at their own Godzilla movie. An announcement was made in Variety magazine with Joey Fang, Chang Xing, and Charles Wu set to star. As far as we know, it was going to have Godzilla, Anguirus, and King Kong. And that's about it. The project never went anywhere after that, likely due to the possibility of Toho taking legal action. Though a part of me wishes it did happen, because having seen a few unauthorized Hong Kong films myself, I would have loved to see a crossover between Star Godzilla and Mr. Mumble. Well, at least we got Shinjuku Private Eyes with a legit Godzilla and City Hunter crossover. Also worth noting that there's a pretty hilarious fan-made trailer out there that kind of makes it more akin to Space Warriors 2000. Before we got Godzilla the Animated Series, TriStar was so confident in their American remake of Godzilla, despite Roland Emmerich doing everything in his power to sabotage the entire production, look it up, they planned out a trilogy in case of success, which, well, was pretty mixed. You can actually find the entire plot synopsis on Sci-Fi Japan, but the shortened version is that the egg at the end of the 1998 film would have grown up as the next Godzilla, and upon getting released from its egg, would have imprinted onto Nyctatopolis. So basically the same thing that happens at the beginning of the animated series. In addition to this, Monster Island was to make an appearance, as well as a new monster named Queen Bitch. I am not making that up. And it's worth noting that the finale would have taken place in Sydney, which was where Zilla was in Final Wars. There's no surprise that because of Godzilla 98's mixed reception, this sequel and a potential threequel didn't happen. But, I mean, we got the cartoon. I remember hearing about this one as I was slowly getting into the online Godzilla fandom when the 2014 hype was picking up. To me, it sounded like Godzilla vs. the Devil, where there was no telling whether or not it was actually real, but people insisted it was. But unlike Godzilla vs. the Devil, Batman meets Godzilla was actually legit at some point. I mean, it made sense because you had the monster boom and Batman trending all over the place in the 60s. All they needed was James Bond and the Beatles. Batman meets Godzilla had two separate treatments, one by Shinichi Sekizawa and another by an unnamed American author whose treatment is actually available at the American Heritage Center in the University of Wyoming, along with other documents from Batman producer William Dozier. It's also worth noting that this film would have been a sequel to the 1966 Batman movie. Basically, how this treatment goes is that Godzilla is being mind-controlled by a German meteorologist named Klaus Finster. Batman, Robin, and Batgirl catch wind of this and watch footage of King Kong vs. Godzilla to kinda pre-game for this showdown. So what they do is go to Osaka to lure Godzilla with a mating call to take him out with explosives. I wouldn't be surprised if this somehow inspired the way they defeat Godzilla in 1984. And that's not all. After Finster dies in the conflict and Godzilla is KO'd, the Japanese government strap Godzilla to a rocket and shoot him off into space. Wow. Who'd have thought that they rip off the ending of the first Gamera movie? Jokes aside, that's pretty wild. However, because of Batman's declining TV ratings at the time, producer Dozier ultimately turned down the project. But yeah, conceptually, this sounds exactly like an extended episode of the original Batman TV series, and I love it for that. Unfortunately, I can't find a lot of info regarding Sekizawa's treatment, but who knows, maybe something will come out eventually, and if something does, I'll be sure to include it in a future installment in this video series. And after all these years, Godzilla and Batman will cross paths for real in Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong. Guess the Avengers just weren't enough. So an American Godzilla trilogy wasn't the only thing Sony had planned for the monster. After the company distributed Godzilla 2000 Millennium in the US, writer Michael Schlesinger kicked around the idea of doing a direct sequel with John Davidson and Joe Dante. But it wasn't anything serious. Until it got pretty serious. Godzilla Reborn would have been a small production with a budget of $20 million and a legit utilization of tokusatsu under Columbia Pictures. Schlesinger aimed to make a monster movie with lighthearted characters and a more serious edge to the monster action in contrast. Because he felt Godzilla movies took the characters way too seriously, only for the monsters to look silly in comparison. The cast of characters would have featured a TV reporter, a skirt chaser, and Shiro from Godzilla 2000. And they're also looking for some big names to fill in some of the roles, like Bruce Campbell, Jamie Lee Curtis, Christopher Lee, and Leonard Nimoy. Plus, Toho seemed to like the idea enough to approve it. The plot would have been centered around the aforementioned reporter taking a vacation to Hawaii, who stays in a hotel that is owned by the aforementioned skirt chaser. While this is happening, there's a science convention going on, which is where Shiro would come into play, the TV reporter and the hotel owner would form a relationship with one another, and of course, Godzilla just so happens to be strolling about in Hawaii, and fights a volcanic bat creature named Miba. So what happened to it, you may ask? Well, Toho was wanting a bigger budget for the film, and in addition to that, Schlesinger tried giving it to other studios, but saw no luck as the head of Columbia Pictures at the time was not interested in producing it. So Godzilla Reborn went nowhere. Kind of a shame, because it would have been a neat, non-ambitious Godzilla film to experience, but I guess it just wasn't meant to be. Anyway, that's all I have for now. Don't forget to check out the poll in the description and vote on which projects y'all want to see next time. Also want to give a big thank you to my channel members and my Patreon supporters. And if you like what you see, feel free to support the channel with the links in the description, and I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy.